Hello everyone, and thanks once again for joining us for this Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, meteorologist with the National Weather Service. First, hazardous weather graphic showing we have still winter storm warnings out for the northern coast of the Seward Peninsula, Shishmaref, as well as northwest coast, Noatak Valley areas. That's out until midnight tonight. Still a lot of strong gusty winds, snow, blowing snow, and several inches falling during the day today around Kotzebue, with winds in some cases gusting as high as 62 miles an hour at Cape Lisburne and anywhere from 40 to 45 miles an hour elsewhere up there. And that's creating whiteout conditions with the snow and blowing snow and the temperatures, of course, down below freezing. And then these winter weather advisories out for mostly late tonight or tomorrow into tomorrow night, in some cases Monday, especially over here in the eastern Brooks Range. Got a snow advisory out for the Sitna Valley, or winter weather advisory due to heavy snow expected there tomorrow into Monday for 8 to 16 additional inches falling, anywhere from 5 to 8, possibly as high as 12 here for the Kenai Peninsula. Winter weather advisories there as well. Eastern Alaska Range winter weather advisory for 4 to 8 inches of snow expected to fall tonight, tomorrow, into tomorrow night there, with southerly winds especially tonight and into at least the first half of tomorrow here, gusting as high as 50 miles an hour out of the south in those areas. And let's see, moving on here, Bristol Bay winter weather advisory out, snow areas, blowing snow and low visibility. Same thing for the Kuskokwim Delta into tomorrow night and possibly early on Monday, as a pretty good system. Next, actually a couple more coming through the area there. On satellite, you can see the first front moving mostly to the northeast here, being driven by good upper westerly winds, but really starting to break up now, although light snow did make it into Fairbanks this afternoon, and they had some moderate snow back toward Indian Mountain. Back to the west there, that first low center pulling up to the west, and again the gusty winds, snow, blowing snow, and winter storm warnings out, with some areas seeing a quarter-mile visibility or less in the blowing snow. And that onto the coast of the north coast of the Seward Peninsula. Not so bad through the Bering Strait. Actually, Tin City reporting freezing rain at times, a little bit on the light side. No precipitation here, St. Lawrence Island. Still seeing visibilities occasionally down under 2 miles and blowing snow there, with winds gusting 30 to 45 miles an hour in some areas, especially at Gamble. This mostly just high clouds, or clouds out here over the Bering Sea, not really producing any precipitation at St. Paul or St. George, and not too bad along the southwest coast here. Areas of snow were pretty light, but the bulk of the moisture here moving to the northeast. This area are trying to catch up, and will be spreading more moisture in form of snow. Mostly snow over the inland areas here, but probably rain like you saw this afternoon for Kodiak Island, and trending that way on the southern Kenai Peninsula and possibly even into western Prince William Sound, trending toward rain with a more southerly flow, especially at the surface, starting to develop as the next system here pulls northward. Otherwise, sunshine this afternoon reported at Adak, and then some scattered snow showers out toward Shemya, while it just plain snowed here in this lingering area, cloudiness and snow around Atka. Otherwise, southeast coast, not a pretty good day, still on the chilly side. And temperature or winds, though, not all that bad. Still some channeled outflow winds going on, but some areas saw pretty light winds. And rolling this through again, this front breaking up by the passing minute here, and the snow starts in Fairbanks. I wouldn't look for a whole lot more, and this whole area is going to really dissipate. And this area will just kick up to the northeast. This one will pretty much just wash out completely as that next system takes over and moves up to the northeast. On the chart today, you can see pretty good high pressure at the surface here over the central interior areas, 1,028 millibars. Even stronger one here over the Yukon. And that kept a little breezy in the channeled areas here of the northern panhandle. And also some breezy conditions down south, but the central area is pretty good lack of gradient there, so just had to deal with sunshine this afternoon. And rain, Kodiak Island, a band of rain mixed with snow. We had basically rain from Middleton Island down to Kodiak, mixture of rain and snow, Alaska Peninsula, all the way back to the Fox Islands, and then all snow, as I mentioned, at Atka, all snow up into Bristol Bay, Kamishak Bay. Anywhere from 4 to 6 inches falling over the greater Homer, Seldovia area, in and around that area today, and lighter amounts up Cook Inlet and into the Matanuska-Susitna Valley areas. And as I mentioned, this front really weakens, as you can see tonight. It's off the map now. Lingering moisture, though, keeps chance of snowing over the Copper River Basin to a lesser extent, or diminishing over the areas north of the Alaska Range. You can see the gradient here with this low tracking northward into the southwest interior. South to north, so that's going to kick those winds up, and there's that wind advisory or winter weather advisory there for the Alaska Range tonight. Dries out here up in the north and northeast, and definitely improving here. Still a lingering trough, but conditions a lot better, especially after midnight here in the northwest. Just some lingering snow showers up there, or flurries. Dry for the Arctic coast. Isolated scattered snow showers here in northern and central Bering Sea, maybe down toward the Pribilofs. High pressure, kind of a short break here in between this weak trough and this rain and snow showers over the Alaska Peninsula. And then the next storm pushing in toward the western Aleutians. Well, tomorrow, track to about this position by tomorrow afternoon. Not quite as strong as what it looked like it would be yesterday by tomorrow, but 975 millibars, good enough for gale force winds for sure, and possible storm force winds, narrow band here in advance of the front, maybe wrapping back around the main low center. Otherwise, this high pressure ridge moving into Bristol Bay, Alaska Peninsula. Still some snow showers throughout much of the day for the Bristol Bay area, but very light amounts and nothing significant. A little more widespread light snow condition with this low center over the Seward Peninsula, central interior westward, and less of that due to the downsloping flow here off the Brooks, or off the well, same thing off the Brooks Range, but that one's weaker up there. Will be dry all the way out to the Arctic coast, but the upper Tanana Valley, 40-mile country, probably won't see any snow tomorrow. Just clouds, rain, could be moderate along the North Gulf Coast, mixture inland or with any elevation, and increasing moisture now, trying to push in toward the north coast of the Panhandle, otherwise increasing clouds, but staying mostly sunny down to the south, light winds across the entire area. And then for Monday, that low tracks northeastward, about like it showed it was going to do yesterday, coming across slamming Bristol Bay with some good southwest winds tomorrow night, turning westerly gales on Monday with that low center pulling into the north there. Another round of snow and across southern Alaska. Rain from Kodiak changed to rain and snow showers with increasing westerly winds, actually probably shutting off completely during the afternoon there, that southwest wind. And then mixture precipitation, eastern North Gulf Coast, rain Middleton Island, chance of snow Prince William Sound, even into the Copper River Basin, nothing north of the Alaska Range. Big change here over the Panhandle as that high slides off to the east and the upper level ridge starts to collapses. So rain and snow, warmer temperatures push into the Panhandle with that warm front. Chance of snow up along the central Arctic coast, scattering out into the interior. Nothing much of any significance in the way of storminess out over the Bering Sea or the Aleutians. It's kind of higher pressure over the central areas with some sunshine. Low temperatures for tonight, down to 20 below up over the northeast interior. Above freezing areas of Bristol Bay, definitely Kodiak Island. Lower 20s, southern Alaska. Teens to mid 20s for the Panhandle. Highs tomorrow. Anywhere from upper 20s to upper 30s there for the southeast coast. Lower 40s Kodiak, as well as areas of the Alaska Peninsula. Edging above freezing south central Alaska, Cook Inlet areas, even in the mid 20s Tanana Valley. Otherwise, single numbers in teens up to the north and northeast. Lows for the following morning, a little below zero upper Yukon Valley, a little below freezing for the south central areas, and highs mid 30s south to teens.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving into IFR, starting the day tomorrow, Sunday here. Pretty good over the northern half of the interior on out to the Arctic coast. Different story to the south here with marginal VFR becoming IFR. Alaska Peninsula on up across Kodiak Island, southern Cook Inlet, Prince William Sound, North Gulf Coast. Holding VFR over the southeast coast, IFR here at Bering Strait, just off the Yukon Delta coast, then inland to the southwest. Improving with temporary ridging here over the central Aleutians and Bering, and then more IFR with the next storm coming into the western Aleutians, which you see tomorrow. Makes a pretty good jog to the east-northeast here up to the Pribilofs by afternoon. Eastern Aleutians, fair conditions move in over the Alaska Peninsula, IFR areas along and off the southwest coast. Another area up here over the Koyukuk-Kobuk Valley, back in toward the Nulato Hills on up to Selawik, and marginal for Kotzebue right on the edge of that, VFR to the north, IFR here, south central Alaska, west of the Alaska Range, Susitna, Manuska Valley possibly, and into the Prince William Sound zone, all of the Gulf of Alaska, or most of it, and still holding VFR for the southeast coast. And Monday morning, got IFR building here along the coast of the Panhandle, otherwise inland areas, especially central and southern portions, staying VFR. Batch of IFR now with that next system rolling into the southwest. Pretty much marginal over the interior, better though up over the central north slope to the Arctic coast, and improving back out over the western Aleutians. Afternoon, IFR continues to advance northeastward here, spilling over the western Alaska Range and toward the Susitna Valley, possibly Cook Inlet, definitely down into Bristol Bay, back out to the southwest coast, Nunivak Island, and some more IFR plaguing the St. Lawrence Island area. Not too bad up here in the north, just areas of marginal stuff, and a band of IFR from the eastern North Gulf Coast southward. And now some IFR over the northern Panhandle. Marginal VFR as you head south across most areas toward Dixon Entrance. Passes Anatuvik, VFR turning toward marginal, moisture coming northward, so that'd be mostly on the southern approach. And that same forecast holds for Adigan. Lake Clark and Merrill, mostly VFR, or mostly IFR at times throughout the day tomorrow. And that same forecast holds for Rainy. And for windy, VFR trending toward marginal VFR. Lowest conditions here on the southern entrance will be trending toward IFR into the afternoon. And Isabel, occasional IFR. Mentesta, VFR becoming marginal in the afternoon. Tanita, look for occasional marginal VFR, mostly marginal, possible IFR at times. And for Portage, IFR. Chilkoot and White, VFR. Freezing levels 2,000 to 6,000 feet here over the western Gulf of Alaska, Kodiak Island area, still at the surface or below for most of the mainland tomorrow morning. And along the southeast coast, starting to edge its way inland a little bit with increasing westerly flow that'll kick in mostly tomorrow afternoon and evening, and not much of a gradient out here over the Bering Sea and the Aleutians. Icing, big batch here sliding northeastward, east-northeast with the next system, moderate, considerable moderate for the eastern Aleutians, areas of considerable moderate here over the Gulf of Alaska, northern Gulf, Prince William Sound, and areas up to the Alaska Range, and then a zone of lighter stuff back to the northwest into the central interior. Jet stream showing ridging holding, but starting to shift eastward a little bit, so that northerly jet aloft will start exiting and easing up over the Panhandle. And we've got this south to north flow here, the trough south and southwest of Kodiak, 70 to 90 knots, and another trough here coming in that flow to the northeast. That'll be dropping the conditions down, another batch of moisture rolling into southern Alaska. And the next strong storm out here over the Aleutians, southwest winds 150 knots. I'll be rolling right up into Bristol Bay tomorrow night and on Monday. For the 9,000 foot winds, low shows up at this elevation there right over the Seward Peninsula. Southerly winds 30, 40 knots ahead of that. Stronger system out here coming into the southern Bering Sea with 50 to 65 knots, some cases high as 70 knots there in advance of that, and then much lighter back out to the west. Panhandle losing the offshore flow, going into onshore flow here. Westerlies 20 to southwest 25 in the north coast. 3,000 feet. Lighter winds, kind of a variable pattern here, but coming northwest right along the coast. Southerlies 30 knots, North Gulf Coast into the Panhandle, 30, 40 knots western interior. Pretty strong winds, 60 to 70 knots there with that system in the Bering Sea, and with that a lot of moderate turbulence. Aleutians into the southwest interior. And most of southern Alaska right up across the central Alaska Range into the upper Tanana Valley.
Technology. It's the rhythm of our everyday life. We're more dependent on satellite and communication systems than at any other time in history. Disruptions can affect our economy and even our safety. To prepare for the effects of such events and minimize impacts, we need to look outside our atmosphere, some 93 million miles away, at a star we call the sun. It's our main energy source. It warms the earth and grows our food. While the sun and the space between may seem pleasant from our perspective, it's anything but peaceful. At its surface exists a chaotic state of eruptions and radiation. And unlike Vegas, what happens at the sun doesn't stay at the sun.
Space weather is essentially emissions from the sun, radiation, magnetic field that erupts from the solar surface, pumped out into space, sometimes right towards Earth. When it impacts the Earth, it impacts our technology. That's what we call space weather.
These solar events and their effects at Earth can disrupt systems we take for granted. From causing blackouts to the power grid, to delaying offshore drilling operations due to inaccurate GPS data. Interference with communication systems can force air traffic to reroute and impact rescue response and coordination. Outside our atmosphere, solar radiation can harm astronauts and the systems they depend on. The good news is that these eruptions can be detected early. Forecasters at the NOAA Space Weather Prediction Center in Boulder, Colorado, have their eyes on the sun at all times.
The Space Weather Prediction Center is part of the National Weather Service and is very much like a normal weather forecast office. We're here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're looking at data, we're looking at imagery, we're looking at model outputs. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches of imminent activity to our customers so they can take action.
In many ways, forecasting space weather is a lot like forecasting hurricanes. Those who rely on space weather forecasts, like electric power grid managers, are informed early on and can begin taking protective action.
When we see an eruption on the sun, space weather forecasters will issue a watch. This is much like a hurricane watch. When a hurricane sits offshore of Miami, for example, perhaps 48 hours out, we too can see way in advance that something may be coming towards the Earth.
As the storm moves toward us, it hits a monitoring spacecraft orbiting 1 million miles away from Earth.
It's kind of our buoy sitting out there offshore, and that hurricane about 30-45 minutes before it makes landfall, we'll get the measurements from the buoy. That's what this spacecraft does for us. That big eruption that left the sun hits the spacecraft. Now we've got the measurements of exactly what's going to impact us here on Earth, and we issue the warnings to give the power grid a heads up that the storm is now imminent. An interesting element to this whole process is that when the forecasters issue the alert, the power grid receives the alert, takes the necessary actions to protect the grid, and the average citizen never knows anything ever happened.
The number of customers who rely on space weather information continues to grow. As our reliance on technology increases, so will our need for constant monitoring of the sun.
Space weather affects technologies. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches to our customers so they can take action.
GPS has changed society. Most people don't realize how remarkable and how many different applications there are.
The GPS has become an integral part, not just of our daily lives as far as cell phones and guidance for our cars and mapping, but the whole system in agriculture is really relying heavily on high accuracy GPS.
So they're using GPS to plant those seeds with centimeter accuracy. And then they can come behind it and irrigate and fertilize right where that seed is with that 1 centimeter accuracy.
The GPS creates a line for the operator that he can steer along, or you go to another level and the operator doesn't steer anymore and the tractor has an automatic steering system on it, much like a cruise control on a car, except for when I push the button it doesn't drive a set speed. When I push a button it stays on a predefined line.
You don't even need lights. You can do it at nighttime. You program your GPS and it's driving that tractor for you. So it's huge, and it's changing the way that the farmers farm the fields.
6 or 7 days out.
There's an interest in GPS applications from space weather side because when the sun is eruptive, it causes GPS to falter, and in some cases it doesn't work at all.
Productivity may suffer to a certain degree in that there's no way that I as a human being can steer as good 8 hours a day as a GPS system's going to do. It's going to be the same all day long. Some of the other application technologies, those are going to be gone. We're not going to have the ability to do good section control on sprayers and planters and fertilizer applicators without GPS.
We see a huge growing customer base in so many different industries, so many different sectors now relying on GPS and high precision GPS. They're all big customers for us.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Sea ice analysis today, still continuing to treat northward with each passing day. Still a little bit of ice here in Bristol Bay, but not a lot, and that's just shore fast there in the north coast, Kuskokwim Bay there. And the forecast still continued to retreat northward through Wednesday of up to 40 nautical miles from where it was yesterday. And for the coastal water forecast for the south coast here, light northeast winds at 10. Otherwise, southeast 20 on the central coast, increasing to 30 knots out of the southeast on north coast. He's up to 8 feet. South 10 for Lynn Canal, switching directions there, but light winds as well. North 15 Stevens Passage, east 15 Clarence Straits, he's 2 feet. And for Monday, southeast 20 for both Stevens Passage and Clarence Straits, he's at about 4 feet. Big increase in winds again for Lynn Canal, south 30, gusts 45 knots, and southwest 25, small craft advisories all along the coast here for 25-knot winds, mostly westerly on the south coast. Prince William Sound, southeast 35 knots, good gales. Still in the forecast for tomorrow there, seas 8 feet, and that's a southeast wind also for the eastern North Gulf Coast. The arrow fell off and southeast 30 for the western North Gulf Coast, southwest 30 here for the Barren Islands. East winds 30 knots right into Kamishak Bay. Northeast 30 southern Cook Inlet. In fact, small craft advisories for all of Cook Inlet for northeasterlies 25 to 30 knots. And for Monday, they'll swing around to the south. Lightest north of Forelands about 20, but small craft advisories continue. South of the Forelands and Kamishak Bay, southerlies 25 to 30, southwest 35. For the Barren Islands, and west 30 for the western North Gulf Coast, turn southwest 30 on the east side, and winds come down to 20 knots for Prince William Sound, seas subside to 4 feet. Kodiak Island, southwest 30 tomorrow, and those 30-knot southwesterlies extend to Castle Cape, and west-southwest 30 knots for the Alaska Peninsula, southwest 25 for Bristol Bay. And then on Monday, southwest 40 knots in the forecast there for Bristol Bay, and eventually trending toward more westerly into the afternoon toward Monday evening. Otherwise, strong winds here at the Alaska Peninsula, good gales west-southwest 40 to 45 knots, seas approaching 30 feet here on the Bering Sea side, and southwesterly gales blowing across Kodiak Island. And storm warnings out for the eastern Aleutians. Winds mostly 50 knots out of the south. Seas building to 23 to 28 feet. And storm warnings for the central Aleutians, on average south 50 to 55 knots. Seas up to 40 feet in the Pacific side. West 50 knots back to the west of Adak. And then swinging around to the northeast at 40 knots there from Kiska on out west. And then for Monday, south 30 knots west of Kiska, southwest 30 knots here, Kiska to Adak, and then westerlies for Atka and Adak at 25 to 30 knots, seas subsiding. And winds still mostly gale force, especially on Alaska Island, westerlies 40 to 45 knots with seas 29 feet. Southwest coast, strongest wind south of Nunivak Island, westerlies 25 knots, southeast 35 for the Pribilofs, otherwise 15-knot winds here for the northern Bering Sea, all the way up to St. Lawrence Island. The Norton Sound, northeast at 20. Outlook for Monday, northeast 15 for Norton Sound, northerlies 15 St. Lawrence Island, and 30 knots as you get down toward Nunivak Island. Then southwest 40 knots there, blowing right into Kuskokwim Bay. West 40 knots for the Pribilofs, northeast 25 for St. Matthew Island. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast, south to southwest 15, pretty light there, picking up to 20 knots. Central coast, brisk wind advisories on the west side here, south winds at 30. Gale force winds from Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort, south 35 and southeast 35 for the Chukchi Sea. Outlook for Monday, much lighter winds here for the Chukchi Sea from Wells up to Cape Thompson, and then from Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort, southwest 20, west 15 on the west side, northeast 15 on the central coast, and east winds 15, increasing to 20 knots towards the embarkation point. For tonight, snow, that front really washes out here, leftover moisture, mostly in the Copper River Basin, south of the Alaska Range. Those winds on the increase as this low pulls northward. Also get pretty gusty here, like through Turnagain Arm and possibly passes of south central Alaska area. But a lot of moisture coming in, mostly in the form of snow over the inland areas, rain Kodiak Island and the outer coastline, snow back to the southwest coast. Conditions improving, winter storm warnings ending up there in the northwest by midnight. Next storm approaching the Aleutians. And again, wind, rain and snow mixed in there tomorrow, approaching the Pribilofs. Snow with this system, these two systems in the interior, and that's starting to push into the Panhandle. You have a big change tomorrow night.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.